Olá, sejam todos bem-vindos ao Brazilian Leather
Good
Webinar.
morning. Welcome to the Brazilian Leather webinar series, Fashion and Sustainability. My name is Rogério Cunha from Market Intelligence for the Center for the Brazilian Tanning Industry, or CICB, the company that is organizing this event. The Brazilian Leather webinar series is brought to you with the support of the National Wildlife Federation, or NWF, a civil society organization working with this industry to develop collaborations to foster market solutions and public policies to reduce the destruction of tropical forests all over the world. Thank you very much for attending this special, one of a kind event that is related to the fashion supply chain in Brazil and in the world. Before we start, I would like to share with you how this event and how simultaneous translation will work. Our moderator will be Mr. Yoann Regent from the Kering Group, who will speak in English. Our speakers are Beto Bina from Veja, which is Vert shoes in Brazil, and Walter Rodrigues, who will be speaking in Portuguese. We also have Ms. Verônica Meurer from the Courovale Tannery, who is here with us. If you'd like to listen to the webinar in Portuguese, we have simultaneous translation. All you have to do is click on the interpretation button at the bottom bar, right next to the Q&A button. You can also hear simultaneous interpretation into English. If you'd like to hear the original audio, you can click off or desligado. Moderators will introduce the topic and then speakers will be able to deliver their talks. If you have any questions, please send them in writing through the Q&A button. We're going to have a specific allotted time for Q&A right after a speaker is done with their presentation and right after moderators or facilitators make their comments. You may have noticed that your mics are off and you won't be able to ask questions aloud. If we are unable to answer your questions because we ran out of time, you can send them later to contato@cicb.org.br. We chose today's topic because of how important sustainability is in the production and consumption of the fashion life cycle. And this is not a temporary trend. This is intertwined with this industry, and it is the foundation for every process in this industry. This is also a reference for the work that we do at CICB and the Brazilian Leather Project, including with our collaboration with Apex Brazil to foster export of leather in Brazil. We prepare, execute, and support projects that are related to sustainability. For example, the CSCB, or the Certificate for Sustainability in Brazilian Leather. And our webinar also talks about this goal because we want a more sustainable industry with ideas, examples, and a lot of shared knowledge about this topic. So today we have Mr. Yoann Regent from the Kering Group, who will be our moderator and who is an expert in biodiversity and animal welfare. At this group, they work with the brands Balenciaga, Gucci, Saint Laurent, and other fashion brands in the luxury segment. They are focused on the supply chain of different raw materials like leather, skins, and fibers, and they need to work with the better or the best standards of biodiversity preservation and animal welfare. They also work with innovative programs and improvements and collaborations. He's also worked for 5 years in the sustainability department at the IKEA Group. Our speakers are Beto Bina from the Vert shoes in Brazil, who is responsible for the supply chain and organization of this industry with a focus on leather, rubber, cotton, and innovation projects. He's also in charge of Far Farm, a startup with the productive chains that are responsible for this, and which has been accelerated by the Fashion for Good in Amsterdam. They also won the Climate Ventures in Brazil. We also have Walter Rodrigues, a Brazilian designer who started working in this industry in 1983 as a stylist for the Mannequin magazine. Now he is a consultant for product design, a coordinator of the design and research group called Inspiramais, and a consultant for other groups, including projects with sustainability and students from fashion schools. I would like to thank our moderator and our speakers for accepting an invitation to be here and to share their experiences when it comes to sustainability and fashion. As we said, during the Q&A session, we'll also have Ms. Verônica Meurer, who is a partner and managing director of the Courovale Group, and they will be able to answer questions about the tanning industry. We are now going to start the webinar. Yoann, you may begin.
Thank you very much. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank CICB and NWE for inviting me to moderate this session on sustainable fashion and the leather industry. So I will just have a very short introduction on the topic. I think we cannot start any conversation today without addressing the current COVID crisis and the impact that this has on fashion and on the leather industry. Indeed, brands such as brands in our group have been affected by the crisis because customers might have reduced their demand because they cannot shop anymore, they cannot go to the stores, the store are closed, or B, they might have other priorities when it comes to their expenses. But actually, in terms of impact, the impact has been even more severe on our suppliers downstream the supply chain, like tanneries, abattoirs, and farmers that are dependent of these leather purchases. So I think actually this put into focus something very important, is that it is crucial to have a robust and sustainable supply chain in place if you want just to continue to have a business, because that will protect you from this kind of crisis. Also, something that is quite interesting is that a lot of attention has been also drawn onto linking this health crisis to the global environmental crisis and biodiversity crisis that is happening in the world. So people, customers, but also the general public want to be sure that what they purchase doesn't have a negative environmental impact. And as such, this sustainability and how leather can be a sustainable material should be used as a competitive advantage in order to make the case for leather. Indeed, I mean, it's not a secret that leather does have an environmental and social impact, but leather can be part of the solution actually to solve the nature and the climate crisis if it is produced in a good way. So Beto will give concrete examples of and source leather that comes from regenerative farming practices that have both a positive impact on the climate, on the biodiversity, but also on the people in the supply chain. So as such, it's very important that we first identify our impacts, prioritize our actions, and then answer the customer expectations and raise their awareness. And that's what I want to speak about now. What do our customer want, and do our customer even care about that? Because in the end, we produce products for our customers, so we need to make sure that we answer to what they want and what they need. Before talking about what they want, it's important to understand who are fashion customers and who are luxury fashion customers. Quite interestingly, they are very young customers. As of today, if you take the two youngest generations, known as Gen Z and Millennials, they already represent around 40% of our customer share, which is quite significant, which means that they have a voice and we should listen to what they say. But more importantly, these customers are going to become the first customer segment by 2025, representing close to 60%, and with Gen Z, the youngest generations, doubling, more than doubling their share up to almost 20%. So we need to talk to these people. And what do these young people want, and what do these young people care about? as you can see, there is quite different prioritizations of expectations and topics of interest of the two youngest generations towards two very clear topics, animal welfare and environmental care. So these two topics are inherently connected to the leather industry, where we're talking about animals. So animal welfare makes sense, but also animals that are grown and can have an impact on the environment. So the environmental care is very important. And some recent studies have also shown that actually during this COVID crisis, the values and the importance of sustainability for these youngest generations have been reinforced. So it's even more important to do something about it now and to share this information with our customers and to raise awareness. So in order to give you some examples about what actions can be done, I would like to share a short video of what Kering is doing when it comes to addressing sustainability in its supply chain. So if you can share the video.
At Kering, when we say luxury, we mean sustainable. This has been our vision from the very first time, one that is shared by our teams all over the world. In 2017, we have committed ourselves to reducing our ecological footprint by 40% by 2025. So we are working to achieve that goal every single day. Because becoming aware of our impact is the first step towards reducing it, we are measuring our footprint at every stage of what we do, from the production of our raw materials to the presentation of the collections in our boutiques. This is how we learned that our supply chain generates 93% of our footprint. So that is where we are focusing our efforts. In Mongolia, we implemented a sustainability program that is better for the environment, the animals, and the herders. In New Zealand, lamb's wool and sheep wool are getting all our attention. And in China, it's silk. In order to inventory and promote the most sustainable fabrics, we have founded a library of 3,800 textile samples that we update constantly. But to reach our goals, we have to do even more, to innovate and to come up with new solutions and new models. That's why we nurture startups that are shaking up the worlds of fashion and luxury. And we are raising awareness in up-and-coming creative minds thanks to partnerships with the most renowned schools of fashion. Because our idea of sustainability goes beyond the environmental issues, our commitment is social as well. In-house, we are dedicated to making Kering a place that fosters diversity, encourages work-life balance, and actively defends women's role. Beyond the borders of the group itself, we pay particular attention to ensuring optimal working conditions hand in hand with our suppliers. We have already taken hundreds of actions around the world, and we're going to persevere on that path by sharing our progress with everyone in our entire industry. Because above and beyond ourselves, our whole sector needs to change in order to make luxury more sustainable. At Kering, we want to both inspire and lead that change.
So before giving the floor to the first speaker, I have some elements to highlight. Basically, something that is important for Kering and that should be important for anyone working in the fashion industry is the importance of the supply chain, and especially what we call the tier 4 suppliers. So basically the farm level, because that's where most of the impact is happening. What this means is you need to have intervention at that level, intervention at the farm level to improve social, environmental, or animal welfare impacts to make a real difference. But this means something very important is that you need to be able to put in place traceability down to these farms if you want to have an impact. And that brings me to my second point, because to build traceability, you need to collaborate. So the importance of collaboration across the sector, across the fashion industry, because many different companies might source from the same places, so they have an interest in sharing information, but also across other industry, and especially when speaking about the leather, working together with the food and the meat industry to build together these traceability solutions. We also need to work with the scientific community in order to have better data and evidence on environmental impact. And then, of course, with the academia in order to be able to train and raise awareness of future customers and future fashion designers. And that brings me to my last topic, which is basically the importance of engaging these future generations and engaging customers, and basically how to make the case for sustainable fashion and sustainable leather, which is something that I'm sure that Walter will bring on later in his presentations. So without further ado, I will leave the floor to Beto Bina from Veja, that is working with sustainable sourcing and sustainable innovation. So Beta, the floor is yours.
Muito obrigado, Yoann, pela introdução.
Thank you very much, Yoann, for this kind introduction. Thank you, everyone at CICB, for having invited me to be part of this event. Let me share my screen and I'll get started right away. I wanted to talk about one of my favorite projects, which is called Couro Gaúcho at Veja. Now, before I start, I would like to say that Veja exports to more than 40 countries, and we use the same brand all around the world. But in Brazil, Veja is named Vert. We had to differentiate the brand in Brazil because of different reasons. So first, why leather? First, there is a philosophical aspect to it. Man has always depended on cattle raising. We have always taken advantage of animal farming, and we have to keep that in mind when we think about this industry. Men and animals are mutually dependent. Secondly, the meat production market is what drives offer, and this market grows. So the meat market is what drives cattle raising, but we are still responsible for that. And finally, leather is a great material. You know that, in terms of performance, sustainability, in terms of its touch, it's great. On this slide, you see some of the products we manufacture. To your left-hand side, you see cotton canvas, then bee mesh, and Campo, which is easy leather. We carried out life cycle assessments, and as mentioned by Yoann, we're still taking baby steps regarding data collection. So to your left-hand side, you see natural fibers. Many people say that all we can use is natural fibers, but it has a lower durability. We can also work with polyester. It is a vegan material, but it brings other problems regarding synthetics. And then leather. Here, the environmental footprint is higher, but the durability is also higher. So as we look at this portfolio, we have to be critical when it comes to assessing whether or not this is more or less sustainable. We have to look at the whole supply chain. And what we try to do is to develop projects deeply. In cotton, we're working with forestry issues and polyester alternatives, but we know that we have to perfect many of our processes. And as Yoann mentioned, we need to have a robust portfolio. I think that is the best way to manage crisis. We can't focus 100% on one single material. So let me talk about leather, especially leather produced in southern Brazil. Our company is spread all around the country. In the state of Acre, we produce rubber. In northeastern Brazil, we produce cotton. And then wet blue leather from Midwest Brazil. It is chrome leather. produced in a traditional way, and we are coming up with the Couro Gaúcho initiative, which is a chrome-free leather. And that's greater for tanneries too. This type of leather is more sustainable. And this is what I wanted to talk about today, to hopefully inspire you. Why do we choose to produce in southern Brazil? Because in that region, the main biome is called Pampa. It is the smallest biome we have in Brazil. It is way distant from the Amazon region, which is in the north region of Brazil. And this Pampa biome is great for cattle raising. And since we make use of this native type of biome, we've got zero deforestation. This is what the biome looks like naturally. Cattle here is part of the solution. They are seen as heroes. Why am I telling you that? Because in southern Brazil, we've been seeing an increase in the traditional type of agriculture, namely soybeans. This is killing the biome. However, cattle helps us preserve the biome, so it is exactly the opposite as what traditional agriculture has been doing. I mean, we do not have to think as these issues considering universal truths. In the Pampas Gaúchos, Marcelo Fetes Pinto is leading this project, and we're assessing and selecting cattle farmers according to what we believe are sustainable practices. So we're looking for farms where cattle is raised in open fields. We look at farms where cattle have access to water and to shade naturally. Since these are natural biomes, we've got great biodiversity. During winter time, these pastures, they are not suitable to cattle feeding. So what we do is to plant exotic fields so that cattle still has access to pastures with high nutritional value. So we do not have to use fertilizers or chemicals. All we do is add some compounds to the soil, such as phosphorus and others, to make pasture have a higher level of nutrition. We also aim at increasing or preserving biodiversity. I took these pictures myself. And Karen and Yoann also work on a great biodiversity strategy. It's important to preserve mammals and large animals, but it's also important to preserve animals at a micro scale, such as bacteria and other microorganisms that are present in soils. A study was carried out by Embrapa, and from this study we can see that since pasture is longer in these regions, there is a higher carbon sequestration. Sometimes we can even get to a negative level of carbon emission, which is really positive. And it's opposite to what we usually see on the news. We also consider animal welfare, the native biomes, and the biodiversity protection, as well as zero deforestation. This is the first step of our industry, right before leather is taken to tanneries. So let me talk about the supply chain. We work hand in hand with cattle farmers. We select cattle and we think about the logistics with them. Then cattle is taken to slaughterhouses and then to tanneries. It's very hard to work with leather because the 5% I mentioned before, sometimes those 5% do not allow us to pose a great influence to the supply chain as a whole. So this is what we try to do. We try to match cattle raisers with slaughterhouses. So farmers can say that they'll be able to slaughter X number of heads in X slaughterhouses, tanneries will agree on a price, and if they agree on a price, if they match, as we say, then they move forward. These animals are marked with ink. This ink does not pose any harm to the animal. And after that, it moves on through the supply chain. Animals are taken then to the slaughterhouses, then they are taken to beam houses and then tanneries. You see the symbol at the bottom right-hand side that says EV003. That is how we trace this leather. Then we've got waste reutilization practices. Tanneries we take animals to are certified. We expect it to be certified according to the CICB certificate, which is the Brazilian one too. And water used in tanneries are reused in crops. So we do think of sustainability in this step of the process too. Now, how relevant is this material? If we go back to the beginning of my talk, this leather has 100% of traceability. It is a zero deforestation type of leather, and during the process, we sequester carbon. It is chrome-free too, and therefore we use less energy, less water, we use no acids and no metals whatsoever. I mean, our company is not perfect, but we're trying to assess which processes will have lower impact to the environment. And then, of course, design and aesthetics are important. This is a beautiful and highly resistant material. It is quite durable, and it will last way more than alternative materials or than natural fibers. I'm not sure how I'm doing on time, but I just wanted to mention that when it comes to native fields, we want to preserve those. And we also named our collection after these fields. That's why we call it Campo, which stands for fields in Portuguese. This is a chrome-free product, and we've been getting great feedback from our consumers. This leather feels softer, so we'll probably be using this Couro Gaúcho, which is the southern leather in other products. Well, that's it. If you have any questions, please just let me know. I'm excited to hear from you.
Really inspiring. Thank you for sharing the great work that Veja, which is one of my favorite brands based in France, is doing. It's great to have more. Now I will give the floor to our next speaker, which is designer Walter Rodrigues. So Walter has great knowledge from material and design, so he will share with you his perspective on fashion and sustainability. So Walter, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Yoann. My name is Walter Rodrigues. I'm the coordinator of the Design and Research Group at Inspiramais. We are a design institution originally from Brazil. And from the very beginning, we've been trying to increase people's understanding on the fashion industry and the perception they have on this industry in Brazil. So my main focus will be Brazil. Brazil is a very young country. Our population is currently aging. There are about 212 million people in Brazil. Out of this 212 million people, 20% are at the age of 0 to 14 years old. 69% of our population is between 15 and 64 years of age. That is to say that this mass of consumers is very important for our sustainability. Now, why is that? Because they have their own take on the industry. This is also important on the way our industry communicates with this mass of consumers. And this is also important considering new possibilities, considering the way through which we can teach these people in universities and through incentive programs so as to increase people's understanding on our industry. And this is also important for companies. So everyone has to take this mass of young people into account. For them, sustainability is crucial. So this is important for us too, because this is something that is of their interest, and it will be something interesting to their children too. Fashion has always played a pivotal role in terms of bringing in new concepts. This was true even before the COVID-19 crisis outbreak. This has also been something that we've had to consider in the fashion industry and in Brazil as a whole. Here we see the winter collection from Balenciaga. During this collection and during this runway, they created this disruptive and dystopic universe. The sky is on fire, the runway was completely flooded, and this was done in March 2020, right before the COVID-19 outbreak. So we believe fashion has great power. Fashion can make consumers all around the globe pay attention to their product and to the communication strategies we have and the messages we're trying to convey. Marine Serre is a young French stylist, and she basically reuses materials. And in the past Fashion Week, she shed great light on children. So she invited models who had children to bring them to the runway. She's now connecting the present with the future. So we have no more excuses. We have to keep an eye on future generations. We have to understand that our business needs to focus on the next 5 or 10 years. At the same time, fashion is all about empathy. Fashion is all about love. It's all about caring for the others. This runway went about in March, before the COVID-19 outbreak, and people back in the day were not concerned about the others, and I believe sustainability is truly connected with all these ideas. On a personal level, this is a great topic to me. I take part in 2 events that have 2 stamps of sustainability. Origin Sustentável stamp was created back in 2013, and we provide support to the shoes industry created by Sintecal and AB Calçados. We follow up our members' processes from the moment they buy raw material up until the moment they end their process with the final product. We want everyone to know how important it is for us to build these ideas together. At Inspiramais, CICB and the CSCB are very important institutions for us. The CSCB is the Sustainability Certification on Brazilian leather. So we take these topics very seriously. That is especially important currently because, as Yoann mentioned, the COVID-19 situation increased the importance of these topics. So let me talk about fashion in Brazil and sustainability. We organize an event for different brands. This event is called Casa de Criadores. This event caters to small-sized companies, many of which know exactly what they want to do in terms of ethics. They consider body-related issues, prejudice. These are young creators, and they actively communicate with the young population in Brazil. They work on inclusion matters strongly. Design Vision is a project that is run by the Grupo Focus. In this project, the aim is to train young folks. And these people, after these training sessions and after raising awareness, they can possibly be part of the group of professionals that work in Casa de Criadores. We've got a second generation of entrepreneurs that are now taking over Brazilian companies. That is especially true for Arezzo and BB, which are shoe companies in Brazil. This second generation is making a difference. They understand how important sustainability issues are for their business, for the other generations, and for building empathy between consumers and their brands. There is a third generation of tannery leaders, such as Fuga, Krumenauer, and Minuano corporations. Tanneries are usually family-owned businesses. So we understand that as these young people take over these companies, they will look for new technologies, and of course, sustainability becomes increasingly important in that regard. Veja is doing great work in Brazil too. They are engaging people so that they can actually adopt and implement these innovative projects. But for that, leaders need to be fully aware on how important these topics are. We've got some supporting institutions such as SEBRAE and Apex. They work on jewelry, they work on the furniture industry, garments, and we believe we can always improve our production process and increase sustainability levels. 74% of young people between 18 and 35 years of age want to become entrepreneurs. We've been having such a hard time because of the COVID-19 situation. We know that people are now focusing more on their comfort. And you know, necessity is the mother of innovation. So out of this 74% of young people, we believe many of them will be working with welfare fashion. It may have to do with furniture, shoes, garments. I mean, design is something that delights everyone. And finally, let me end with a question. I mean, in Brazil and all around the globe, if we think of the supply chain, our production process is still largely connected with the Industrial Revolution mindset. Many of our leaders and managers do and act as if they were living in the 20th century. They usually do things because their fathers did the same way or because of the grandfathers did it the same way. So we have to think of the 21st century because that's the time when consumers focus on. They want to consume and buy through their mobile devices. They are looking at screens all day long. So how can we bridge this gap between the 20th century mindset and the 21st century mindset? How can we, as part of this industry, how can we raise our voice? This webinar is a great example of that. The work the CICB has been doing has been great. So how can we build this cognitive pathway so that we can update processes and our leaders' mindset? People have to know that this will be important for everyone. Thank you.
Well, that was really inspiring. and it's great to hear from what you're working on in Brazil. So before going to specific questions to our two presenters, I would like to address two questions to Verônica Courovale, which is representing the Courovale Tannery. So Verônica, thanks for being with us. And my first question for you would be, how is the leather industry, how are tanneries getting prepared to meet customer demands and market demands in terms of sustainability?
Thank you, Yoann. And thank you everyone who is attending this webinar. Well, actually, with your question, I get an opportunity to talk a little bit about our tannery and about everything that we have done so far. We can talk about how we are prepared to cater to customers' needs. First, we have certificates. Through certifications, we make sure that our activities are sustainable. As Beto said, we have LWG, which is acknowledged all over the world, and we have CICB. Now, with these tools, we're able to have proper activities at the tanneries, and we're able to look for continued improvement. That's also how we're able to make sure we meet demands by the market and by young consumers, because more and more young consumers are worried about where their products come from and where raw materials come from. With our suppliers, we always look for transparency and for compliance. By complying with the rules that have been pre-established, we'll be able to offer the leather that is produced with good environmental, social, and economic practices. So we have both certificates. We have LWG since 2011, and we have CICB since 2018. So we're able to ensure sustainability throughout our processes to all of our customers.
Thank you very much, Verônica. I have a second question. In my introduction, I talked about the importance of collaboration and stakeholder engagement. In your opinion, what is the role of NGOs and what is the role of governments to help the leather industry to build a sustainable pathway?
Well, both of these institutions are certainly able to support us, and if they do support us, we're certainly going to get to better results. NGOs are fully integrated with the media, and NGOs and the government can help us raise awareness with the general population. So I think they should be helping us fight misinformation, and they should debunk the myth that leather and leather articles are villains when we talk about environmental sustainability. Beto has also mentioned that. So we need to look for ways with NGOs and with the government to improve information about the leather industry, the food industry, and the meat industry. New generations want to know where leather comes from and how this industry works. They also want to understand how this industry is going to transform waste from the food industry into a noble material with a lot of added value. When people understand this process, they understand that the leather industry is sustainable. So NGOs and the governments could help us work with that and help us fight misinformation.
Thank you, Verônica. It's super, super interesting. Now I have one question to Beto. So Beto, one of the key elements, one of the key challenge we discussed about that is transparency and traceability. So what, in your view, what elements are necessary to build this transparency and traceability in the supply chain? And then how can you best communicate and share this information to your customer?
Thanks, Yoann. I was going to speak in English. Vou falar em português. Eu já estava respondendo um pouco no Q&A aqui, tentando falar realmente sobre
I
isso.
was trying to answer this in the Q&A tool. I think we have a number of bottlenecks and a number of challenges. Number one, this is a very long chain. We have a number of partners throughout it, and we need to be able to map them out. On my slides, I was showing you that we have 3 different types of traceability. We may have ink, we may have branding, and then it becomes data. And right now, with IT companies, you have data from the beginning, but we have different stages to it. It's a very long supply chain. Second of all, we need to make sure that the people collaborating with us have the same vision and are on the same page regarding our mission. It goes beyond financial incentives. So we need both financial and non-financial incentives, because if it's only about money, we're not going to be able to change the meat process. We won't be able to change leather. So how can we collaborate and how can we inspire people through non-financial incentives? And regarding communication, I think we need to be humble and we need to understand that we don't have all the answers, because we don't. As Veronica was saying, we need to be honest and we need to acknowledge what we can measure. If you go to veja.fr, you can see the whole supply chain. We even showcase contracts and agreements. And Celso has a question about the impact of the field collection, and we are trying to measure it. We haven't been able to do so yet. We think that it's better to use native fields because of carbon sequestration, but we haven't been able to measure it yet. And I think when we communicate to consumers, we need to be transparent and let them know that we don't have all the answers, but we're trying to be as honest as possible.
Thank you very much, Beto. I'm going to ask you a second question that I know you answered it in writing in the chat, but I think it's interesting to have this conversation with a larger audience. Someone asked you your opinion on the difference between chrome-free leather and wet blue leather, and how can you compare the environmental impacts the same way it's not so straightforward to compare impacts between plastic and leather. What's your opinion on that, and can you elaborate a little bit on your answer?
Posso sim, Yoann, foi
Of course. I think this is a question by José Monteiro, and I really like this question. You see, I'm not a hyper expert on leather, but what I do know about what we call the chrome-free leather or the easy leather is that it doesn't require more chemicals than the wet blue. However, our bottleneck is that since we have vegetable materials, we don't have as good preservative traits. With ours, we have to finalize it quicker or more quickly. However, when it comes to finishing or tanning, both of them are comparable, they are equivalent. So if your product requires more ink, then maybe this is going to play a bigger role in the amount of chemicals you're going to use, but not as much whether or not you're using chrome. So we have this easy leather product, and maybe Veronica has an opinion on that. But José, we don't think this is true. We're not going to use more chemicals for the chrome-free.
I don't know if Veronica wants to answer.
Te joguei na fogueira agora, Verônica.
Na verdade, também é uma questão que
I put you on the spot, Veronica. Well, this is a very controversial topic. And as Beto said, we don't have absolute truths in this case because it's really hard to measure these things. So right now, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to chrome-free or metal-free leather, I think sometimes we have a longer process. And since it requires longer, sometimes you have to use more water than when you have the chrome leather. However, I don't know whether or not this is more or less sustainable. It's hard to say.
Yeah, assessing environmental impacts is always a challenge because there is so many different things you need to take into account. So I think we could debate over that for a very long time. One final question, and that will be coming from me actually before we close the session, would be to Walter. Walter, you work a lot on a daily basis with young people, young designer, and regarding to what you have said about their expectations and their aspirations, what do you think is the key upcoming issue that will matter the most for this generation, and especially in Brazil? And then maybe do you see that there is one brand globally or in Brazil that could be shown as an example to answer such issues?
Yoann, muito interessante isso, porque
Yoann, that's a really interesting question, because since I am in touch with young people, I'm always trying to understand their values. What matters to them? And I think right now we need to be transparent. And I'm not saying that because Beto is here, but Vert is a wonderful brand and they have a great idea. But if we think about brands all over the world, we have big luxury conglomerates like you and others that are really concerned with sustainability, because sustainability really has an impact on the choices made by young consumers. And they are young now, but they will keep on purchasing items for a long time, and they need to clearly see how practices go within companies. And as a designer, I understand that sustainable practices are not 100% of processes sometimes, because we have a lot of stages in productive processes. However, when companies are transparent and they show that at a certain point of the production process, they are worried about the environment and they are careful with the waste that they create or with how they dispose of materials, that's the most important point, in my opinion. I would say that a lot of companies, especially with young designers, are concerned about this. And within this industry, leather has a high perceived value. We see it as a noble material, and it allows us to create not only new products, but products with reutilized materials. That means that we have a longer life cycle for leather. So we can not only use safe, sustainable sources, but we can reuse this material later on. That's why, in my opinion, information is paramount right now, as Verônica said. We need a very strong communication channel so that people understand that sometimes villains are not the ones that we envision when we purchase something. And oftentimes, those we think are villains are actually working with very good practices. That is why information is paramount in the fashion industry, so that consumers feel comfortable when they choose a product for their lives.
Thank you, Walter, and thank you all. I will now leave it to Rogerio to close the session.
Bom, estamos nos aproximando do final do Brazilian Leather Webinar Series, Fashion and Sustainability. Quero agradecer muito a presença de todos vocês e a disponibilidade dos nossos convidados em compartilhar conteúdos tão relevantes para o nosso trabalho. Lembrando que este evento de hoje teve o apoio da National Wildlife Federation, a NWF, organização norte-americana de conservação ambiental. Em breve, no dia 15 de outubro, teremos a edição Furniture and Sustainability do Brazilian Leather Webinar Series, novamente com convidados que são referência mundial em suas áreas de atuação dentro do universo da indústria moveleira. Coloquem nas suas agendas essa importante data. Muito obrigado e até breve. Obrigado a todos.
Obrigado.
Thank you. Obrigado.